Hey guys, here we are again, another episode with Conversations with Kristine van Dooren, the author of the podcast Finding Purpose. And I welcome you. I hope you've already heard some of her story. If not, be sure to check into it. Hi, Mom.
Hi, here we are again.
Yeah. By the way, Mom, look, I've got a different cup this time.
Oh no, I
I don't
still
know.
have the one I always have. Pink.
This cup you gave to me as a gift, and I love it so much. It's got
Yeah,
like
I recognize it
amazing
have birds
stickers.
on it, right?
Makes me think of you. For those of you who aren't aware of it, we don't live in the same city anymore for about 12 years. We live
Oh,
about
has it
4
been
to
that
5
long?
hours apart. So this is also a
Yeah,
special
yeah.
time that I get to have with you. As far as your podcast and getting to know you more, I was thinking today we could talk about the whole issue of having all these children. You have five daughters. And I don't know, maybe some of our listeners are still considering if they should have children. Some others might already have adult children and some might still be in the middle of it. And I thought maybe I can come up with some questions. I hope I can ask the right questions that the listeners can get the information that they're longing for as far as
Okay.
how you managed. What do you remember a certain time in your life, I don't know, as a little girl or later, that you wanted to have so many kids? Or did it
Not
just
necessarily so many kids, but my I have two younger sisters, and the
right?
youngest one is 8 years younger than me.
Okay.
So we were playing, or I was playing mommy all the time. I have pictures of us and singing to her and rocking her. And when she was getting a little bit older, I would do her hair. I did crafts and painting with her. And, so that was probably the beginning of that kind of mommy love and mommy care. But
Yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't just something that came out of me, but it was from my mother's example.
Yeah.
And I think that's what anything that has to do with marriage and family life, probably the biggest difference that it makes in your thinking and your dreams or, likes and dislikes has to do with how you grew up.
Probably.
And yeah, so, I only have nice memories, and my mother was home. She always did, you name it, everything for her three daughters: music lessons, dance lessons, bluebirds, parents meetings, and my dad was also involved, and he was interested. He showed interest in his daughters all the years we were growing up. It wasn't like he would just off at work and come home and ignore us or something. And we did a lot of family vacations together. And so that's kind of from my mother's side. She loved being a mother and a housewife. And from my father's side, he grew up in a German family in Washington State, and he was the 11th child, the baby of the family. But there, it was also a very close-knit family, revolves around church, revolved around, the works. They had orchards. And, so it's a lot is that old way of thinking of course you have lots of kids, and that's what life is about. It's
So
not about fancy job or something.
Yeah. And then you came to Berlin and you met Thomas. Now his family situation was completely different.
Well, even like when we got married, I mean, it wasn't something that we talked about in those days of marriage and babies, but he was the second son, and his parents were divorced, I think, when he was about 6 or 7, quite young. And so there were a lot of struggles. His mother always struggled. His father was in and out. The grandma was probably pretty consistent, there to care for the children. And so, there were a lot of difficulties. And I mean, even his mother, and she's written about it. I've read things that she's written about her life.
Yeah.
So not only was she not capable on her own of taking care of children. I mean, she had the trouble with the husband.
Yeah.
in the first few years, and her mother were by themselves during the war. Her father wasn't around. So she had a very troubled, difficult, scary upbringing herself.
Yeah.
And and for me growing up, my father hadn't gone to war. Nobody that I knew, as far as his brothers or whatever, I didn't grow up with any type of connection to the suffering that was going on in Europe. And so I had a happy, carefree life.
Wow. But it's a great testimony of how my dad's life, basically, Thomas from Berlin, how it was able to take such a different turn when he became a father because of his wife coming from, a healthy family, and how between the faith in God and your influence, you guys' love for each other. I mean, of course, that's the foundation. You guys were able to, your family, I would say my upbringing with us 5 girls was definitely different than what it could have been if Thomas wouldn't have had you or faith and restoration in his life.
He also, because we were in California almost 3 years.
Yeah.
And so included when we got married and when you were born. And then we used to visit there regularly as our daughters were coming into the picture. And he learned a lot from my dad. And he also had conversations, like my dad would say, well, Thomas, you should do this or you should do that. Or so my dad was like an example also in the way Thomas saw how loving he was towards me and my sisters and involved. And then also in our children's lives, so yeah, Thomas learned a lot from my dad.
Well, and probably also of the marriage.
Yeah.
Wow. When you met Dad in Berlin and then you went to London and you wrote him a letter and considered going back to Berlin because you were in love with him, did you already then think, oh, he could be the father of my children?
No. Yeah, when you're 19 going on 20, you don't think of the future. It's all about the here and now. Well, at least in those days for me.
And so, when you had 5 daughters then. Yeah, let's first talk about the first 4. They were back to back, and then Debbie, the little one, was a surprise later on. But when you had those 5.
Well, wait, something interesting, and that I remembered when I was writing about it a few podcasts ago. After you were born, okay, so I loved being pregnant. I loved the birth. I loved nursing my baby. I loved being a mommy of a baby, and and not that everything was easy, but I just loved it. And and also thinking my whole future dreams of photography, being a photographer, nothing else was important to me. I loved being a mommy. And I remember telling Daddy just a few weeks after you were born, I can't wait to have another baby.
Wow.
And then a few months after that, and we did talk about it, I talk about it in the episode, he said, well, what do you think? Because we had never talked about it before,
Yeah.
And I remember telling him I would like to have 5 children. And I don't know where, that just popped out.
Wow. Who would have known?
And okay.
Wow. And he was fine basically with the idea.
He loved being a daddy. And I think he loved when I told him I was pregnant. He loved delivering you. So, he had this amazing experience of delivering his own baby. And also we didn't have fears.
Right.
And I think that's
obvious.
so many people, that's what keeps them from getting married, having babies, moving to a different country. It's always this fear thing. And and even though we had different family backgrounds, we both kind of had that. And maybe it was also this kind of hippie mentality. It's all going to work out. It's all going to work out. And he loved you know, he was always playing with you at Living Waters and carrying you around. And, you know, he loved having babies. So,
Oh, that makes me all choked up.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, you can see I posted so many pictures, you know, so far on Instagram, and that he was carrying you around, and even pictures where we're kind of in a group together. He's holding you instead of me, and maybe it was also like so special for him. And I think also that's something, a new side that I realized by looking at those pictures and everything, is that, you know, he doesn't have memories of this warm, loving, growing up security as a, even, you know, even as a young child.
mhm,
And so I think it was probably fulfilling something in him too, you know,
mhm,
learning to be a father and
mhm,
loving to be a father, and,
mhm.
you know.
Wow. Um, y- so you had five girls, and probably each one of us is completely different. How did you go
Yes,
about navigating yourself through raising all of us with the different personalities? And yeah, I mean, I find it like so challenging just with two to try to,
yeah.
cater to everybody's
One
needs.
thing, one thing I didn't realize until I had the second baby is I kind of would have assumed that the same mother, basically the same situations, the same love, the child's going to be the same. And I don't know, I found out the second one, even just when she was a few months old, was just really different. The way she related to me, and um she was fearful of things. And I mean, you if you're paying attention as a mother, you can see character traits in your babies. You know, either they laugh a lot, or they cry a lot, or they're angry, or they're stubborn, or they like to eat, or they don't like to eat, you know, all these kind of things. And, you know, so that was kind of like, oh, okay, so every child is different.
Yeah,
And I mean, that's a challenge in itself, and it starts as a baby.
yeah,
So you have to kind of, I mean, of course, as a mother, you have, I felt I was always feeling more comfortable, and I, you know, having experience like about nursing and all these things that how you have to take care of a baby and a toddler and everything. But you have to adjust because the child is different than the child before.
grow with the challenge. What
Yeah.
what did the five girls bring out in you that you had to like then also like I know, for example, for me, with my daughter, I was able to, in raising her, I was able to um live out my gentle, patient, loving, kind side. And with my son, I had to learn to be tough. I had never
Oh,
done that before, being a singer in a band and the oldest sister. I never had to be tough and
oh,
like hold my ground against anybody. I was always happily welcome by all my surroundings, more or less, especially the people that I love, and with my son, whom I also really love and who really loves me. But he challenged me to the max. And I wonder, with five girls, I'm sure they brought out different, you had to like, yeah. Do you have any memories in that? Like what you had
yeah.
to learn with each child?
Yeah. Well, one thing I remember in the very beginning, is you learn, I remember thinking I was a patient person, and then I had a baby crying, and I had a breast infection, or, you know, some kind of trial going on. And so patience is the biggest deal.
Yeah.
And, but, one thing that it also brought out, or was like a learning experience, is that we would always talk together about
Mhm.
our children and what's the next step, and their relationship with each other and our relationship, and how do we deal, you know, with this situation or that situation, like always having to adjust, but always discussing it together.
Right.
And when you say like being challenged, I mean, I had those kind of experiences with some daughters too, but so in some ways, in some incidences and relationships, daddy was more kind of had to take charge, and other incidences I had to kind of take charge depending on the personalities. And and a lot what changes is not only the child's personality, is your whole living situation. And the older you get or whatever, I mean, it depends if you're healthy, if you have health issues, if you have financial issues, you know, work issues, all these kind of things play into our, you know, life as parents that we're trying to deal with. And at the same time, you know, create a safe place for the children.
Yeah.
So it's always, you have to be ready to be willing to change all the time, keep rolling with the punches.
Wow. Did you ever pray? Like, were there moments that you can remember where you were praying of needing wisdom to raise the kids, or did you always feel like you were, like you said, rolling with the punches?
Oh, we always prayed because you were born right after we became Christians. And so prayer was a foundational part of our lives. And of course, a big share of it would revolve on our relationship and our marriage. We would pray about for decisions and pray for patience with each other, and then also for our children. And we had, yeah, I mean, it was a normal part of our lives as parents, is praying for our children. I remember even like when you girls were little, we started praying for our daughters' husbands.
Yay.
And now I've got them all, you know,
Yep.
good thing I prayed for the right ones.
5 son-in-laws. True. Yeah, I remember also that you guys also shared that with us, because I remember starting at a very young age praying for my future husband. I remember specifically from the age of 13 upwards. I remember always praying for him wherever he is right now. And when you would pray,
I mean, well, the nice thing about that is everybody can relax by, it's basically you're putting your life in God's hands. And so it's, if I'm going to be married, when I'm going to be married, who I'm going to be married to, you know, I want it, I don't want it, all of these things. It's just like letting go of it and saying, God, you know, I want to live a life that's pleasing to you. And
yeah. And when you and dad would pray for your daughters, how did this happen? Was this like once a week or at church, or did you guys pray in the evenings or the mornings, or did you go in the room? Like, how can I imagine that this practically was happening?
Well, we always prayed with the children before they went to bed at night, you know, that they would sleep good and have good dreams. And, you know, sometimes nightmares or things like that were involved. But normally the evenings, when, especially when the children were small, you know, we would talk about things, and then we would pray specifically for situations, whether it had to do with school or health or whatever. And sometimes we would actually, when the children were sleeping, we would go into their rooms and sit by their bed and pray for them right there while they were sleeping.
And did they also then get involved in praying in the evenings? I'm trying to remember when we were little, if we also audibly joined in on the prayer, or did we listen to you guys pray?
Yeah, I think so. We would use, because sometimes, you know, we also prayed before meals, and we always did family meetings, you know, from the time you guys were in grade school growing up, we did family meetings. So prayer wasn't like, you know, reciting some memorized thing, but it was, you know, everybody take turns. So, yeah.
And I just remembered the family meetings. We would read in the Bible together, right? Didn't usually somebody read a scripture?
Yeah.
And usually we would, in the family meetings, also talk about things that were off. Like I remember you would, dad or you would navigate us like, okay, you need to say you're sorry to so and so, and you need to, do you forgive her? And but are you going to also work on your attitude towards so-and-so? And I always feel like those family meetings made such a difference because they were a regular opportunity for reconciliation. Instead of things building up more and more and more over the years, there was always this kind of outlet of, you know, finding our way back to each other, learning to relate to each other, learning to forgive each other. I remember you guys even practiced with us. So do you want to ask her for forgiveness? Okay, then you can say, I'm sorry for yelling at you or taking your clothes or whatever. And do you forgive her? Okay, well then tell her and stuff. I remember you guys were
okay.
in that way. I tried to do the same with our kids. We also would have family meetings. Yeah.
I think something I thought about that since I've been writing about our life at Living Waters after we were Christians. And one of my daughters listening, she said, oh, you know, you talk so much about the Bible or, you know, these things. And I said, that's all we talked about every day. Our whole life was, we are Christians now. That means we need to learn from the Bible how to live as Christians. And so that was a turning point in our lives of pulling us out of the old life and teaching us a new way of thinking and new goals in life and new morals and perspectives, putting everything into perspective. But that, I mean, even friends of mine who were around in those days, they didn't have that kind of experience where they as a couple would be reading the Bible together and talking about it. So we had such a hunger. We wanted to learn what it means to be a Christian according to the Bible. And the other thing that kind of enhanced that in our relationship and in our lives is that Thomas wanted to share the truth, the gospel, with his mother and his family. And so he was spending hours on Saturdays in this little cabin writing these letters in German, which meant he would be sitting there with an English Bible and a German Bible and learning. So he was applying himself, basically studying and translating, and in love reaching out to, I mean, he wrote like 8, 9, 10 pages, like, you know, in a day or whatever. And then, so kind of what he was experiencing, he brought that in also to our relationship, because I wasn't doing that. I mean, I was busy with the baby and helping out in the communal kitchen and stuff. So he was studying and learning and had lots of questions, and he would bring that home, you know, into our relationship. So that was the preparation to, you know, having family meetings.
But I think that's really unique with our family, because I haven't met so many kids that grew up in missionary families that enjoyed faith being in the midst of their family. And I feel like with you guys, I feel like you didn't force us to act as Christians. You introduced us to Jesus. That's what to me is really interesting. And when I look back, I feel like you guys were always saying, you know, here's Jesus, this is what he's like. And if you want, Naomi, Esther, Elizabeth, Miriam, you can decide yourself to follow him. And that's, to me, was really, really, really different in our family than any other family I've met. Instead of demanding us to just act like Christians and to have a Christian culture at our house, I feel like it was more like, let's meet Jesus, let's get to know him, and, you know, let him come into your life and into your heart and touch you. And I always feel like when I grew up, looking back, I feel like you guys introduced me to the most precious person in the universe at a really young age, and you gave me the opportunity to choose for myself when and if I want to live my life with him and for him, which I did. And I remember also that really vividly of how you and Dad knelt down with me in the living room when I was 5, because I came to Dad and I said, I want to live my life for Jesus too, the way you guys are. I remember that. And then he read some scriptures with me, and then we knelt down and I asked him how to pray, and he kind of showed me and helped me a real simple prayer. And I remember crying and feeling this amazing warmth come in my heart. And I don't know if you remember, but I had always these really horrible nightmares.
Yeah.
And in my memory, I'm not sure, I wonder if you confirm this or if it was different, but in my memory, after that, they stopped, because I can
Oh.
remember that the time that I gave my life to Jesus was towards the end of living in this certain house. And I remember living in the next house, I hardly had those bad dreams anymore.
Oh.
But I always felt like from that day forth, I was always walking through life with, my secret confidant, with
Shepherd.
this shepherd, yeah, and friend and big brother, who cares about me and loves me and is with me. And I feel like that's what you guys introduced us to without forcing us. So yay to how you raised us in that respect. And yeah, I maybe just in closing, before we call it quits for this episode, what would you like to, is there anything you would like to tell maybe young mothers or women who are going to become mothers, or older women maybe who aren't in touch so much with their adult daughters anymore? I don't know. Do you have just a few things you might want to inspire for the listeners? Yeah, as far as their relationship with their girls or sons.
Yeah. Oh, that's a big question. I mean, pretty much, like our culture today is very much, it's all about me. The most important thing is me, and that I'm doing good and that I'm happy, and I don't need anybody else. I don't need a husband or a wife or a this or that. It's all about me and it fulfilling, But when you come down to it, and particularly older people, it always, in rich people or poor people, and you hear also rich people who have everything and they say, but I'm at odds with my son. I haven't seen my son for 10 years, or it always, the most important thing in life is relationships and love. So you get love and joy and warmth, and safety in relationships. And so it's worth working on, whether it's the parents or the children. And it's not that big a deal to say you're sorry to somebody. But there's no point in like putting blame out on other people. Oh, my parents, they weren't good parents, or or my sister did this and this to me. That gets you nowhere. That's not going to help you.
Yeah.
It really is a lot about forgiveness and being willing, and if you want love, forgiveness and patience is involved. So
yeah, that's true. I feel that's also what you taught us, like us girls, not only the way you dealt with us, but that's also what you taught us how to deal with each other. I mean, growing up with 5 girls, we've had so many conflicts and so many issues amongst each other. And if I look back, there has been so many crucial moments of, I am sorry, please forgive me. And to me, I feel like when you apologize, even if you feel like the other person started or it's their fault, but if you make a humble choice to actually make yourself vulnerable and ask the other person to forgive you and to say sorry for what you did, even if they started it or whatever, it really is, it makes people drop their weapons, and I feel like,
and for yourself too. I mean, if you don't forgive and communicate with people, your heart becomes hard.
Yeah.
So, where does that leave leave you in life?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so
Woo!
thank you for all of this beautiful talk. And that way, maybe you can take some inspiration home to your own personal situation, dear listener or viewer. And may God help all of us, and after listening to this, to remember again afresh to forgive each other and to love each other and to be patient with each other. And basically, when you were saying it's all about me, so I understand you're also saying it shouldn't just be about me. but about us. And
Yeah.
not what do I need, but what do we need, and how can we live together? And yeah, thank you for that amazing advice. It makes me think, as we close now, that loving and forgiving and living with each other has a cost of opening up to each other and asking for forgiveness. It's not something that comes without bringing an effort, right? Making an effort. And
Yeah.
yeah. Wow. Okay. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Love you guys. God bless you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.